Well, I like making food that tastes good, and I don't even mind making food that tastes bad. But if I had to choose, I think I'd pick the former. So if you want to know how to make it a little bit better, but maybe not quite as good as it maybe could be, I think that you should listen to what I'm talking about. And if you learn a little something from this, well, I hope it served a purpose, and hey, that's what we're here for. Good, better. Nailed it. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Cook Better podcast. My name is Corey, and today I'm going to talk with you about Brussels sprouts. They are my favorite vegetable, I think, at least at the moment. I go back and forth on things with what's my favorite at the time. It changes depending on when you're going to ask me. Well, Brussels sprouts have kind of been, I'd say in the last 5 years, the vegetable that I prefer over any other. And I don't, when I cook them, it's not that there's a lot of different ways you can cook them. But they're just, and so in that way they're versatile, but I think I just like the flavor of it. I like that it's not super sweet. I love carrots, but carrots are, they're sweeter, especially when you get them cooked down. And so I like the Brussels sprout just because it's a little bit more of a bitter flavor, and there is a lot of, and they kind of go with anything. They're not so much an ingredient where like a green or a bell pepper or a carrot or something like that you have as an element of a dish so much. If that makes sense, a carrot is, you can put it as an ingredient in to serve kind of as part of the whole dish. Brussels sprouts aren't that way. So I guess they're kind of a standalone side, so to speak. And that's something that I really like about them. And they're easy to cook up. And they're really hard to mess up, in my opinion, which is also great. My favorite way to cook them is a way that I can just let them cook in one pan on one burner in my cast iron pan. I'll throw them in there, and then they're going to town while I'm working on other stuff. I don't have, with Brussels sprouts, you don't have to constantly be stirring them and paying attention to them. So it's not like they're a vegetable or a side that requires a lot of focus and attention, or you'll mess it up. And so that's great. If I've got a chicken, or if I'm making a sauce, or I'm doing something that requires my full attention, I like having Brussels sprouts as a side. And it just, I don't know, it seems to complement everything. I always think of Brussels sprouts very similarly to asparagus, and I don't know why that is. Maybe because they're kind of a polarizing vegetable, just like asparagus is. If you most people are kind of either they like them or they don't. It's not a middle of the road camp on, especially asparagus, but I found Brussels sprouts can be that way as well. And if you don't like Brussels sprouts, I would maybe challenge you to try one of these ways of cooking it and see if it's still the case, or maybe it's just that you haven't had it prepared in a way that tasted very good. I know for me, growing up, I never once ate a Brussels sprout growing up, living at my parents' house, because my mom could not stand, and still to this day, I don't know, it's weird, she won't eat cooked Brussels sprouts. It's a weird caveat there, but she will shred it up and make them into kind of a Brussels sprout salad and eat them raw, but cooked Brussels sprouts she will not eat. And her reasoning for that is that when she was a kid, her parents boiled the Brussels sprouts, and I don't know, I've never had my grandma's Brussels sprouts, But the way it sounds is they were just boiled. I don't know if the water was salted even or anything. I'm not sure. And then my mom was a young kid whose parents said, you will eat this before you get off the table. And, so she can't stand them, still won't eat them to this day cooked. Even though I've tried with my recipes and other family members have tried, and it hasn't happened yet, but there will be a day. And then she'll probably fake that they taste good just to be nice to us. So I don't even want to push it at this point, because I think it's going to be a false positive is what's going to happen there. But anyway, I never had them as a kid, and therefore I never really saw them prepared correctly or incorrectly. But it wasn't something that I had any experience with. So I think I would have said, until I started making them myself, pretty much that I just didn't like them, because my mom always said they were terrible. But and Brussels sprouts are a relatively new vegetable to the United States anyway. Supposedly, way back in Rome, they had some version of a Brussels sprout or something, way back when. I don't know if that's true or not, but they weren't in the United States until early 1900s, like 1925, somewhere around there. And then they were introduced in Louisiana, I guess, probably because I think it was due to the French, is my understanding. Brought them over to Louisiana and they started growing, and then they kind of wandered west with the growing into California in 1939. So if you think about it that way, this is a vegetable that, depending on your age, but is pretty new, and it's not something that's really had a lot of time to develop compared to other foods. So my grandparents, who are in their 80s, they probably didn't really grow up with too many Brussels sprouts, and then now they're cooking them, and it's just a lot of vegetables, depending on who the cook is, but a lot of vegetables, many people just boil, and I can totally understand why a kid or as an adult you don't want a vegetable if it's just boiled. Now, they're good for you, and you're gonna eat them as an adult just to say you ate your vegetables and ate something healthy. But I think that preparation is so big with vegetables. And now, I like to go on tangents here, but now being a vegetarian is so much more popular now that there's so many recipes out there for vegetable-based foods, or just cooking whole vegetables, which is the best way to eat vegetarian. But flavoring them and cooking them in a way that's going to make them taste better. So that's what I think has happened with Brussels sprouts over the last, if like we're talking 1925 when they were introduced in the United States, then we're talking 100 years now that restaurants and people have been developing how to cook them, and which is kind of mind-boggling to me in a way, the way recipes develop over time, because it's not like it's something insane secret on how to prepare things. You can either boil them, you can put something directly over a fire or under a fire roasting, or you can put them in a pan on fire or above the fire, and so then or like sauteing or pan frying, and that's kind of like it. So the fact that the flavors, but I guess, that's just kind of was weird to me that food's got to develop over long periods of time. And, back in the 60s or 70s, there was everything put into Jell-O, vegetables in Jell-O. And when that quick mix Jell-O came out, and that was, marketing worked well with that, and everybody's putting, you get a hot dog in Jell-O and just all kinds of weird stuff, but I don't know how I got there. Anyway, Brussels sprouts. So one of the things I will say right off the bat that I did not know until about a half hour ago is that I always assumed it was called a Brussels sprout, but apparently it's Brussels with a S, plural, Brussels sprout. So there you go. Maybe somebody else didn't know that. I guarantee it. I don't know. I didn't know that. I didn't pay attention when I'm buying them at the store when the sign says Brussels sprouts, $3 for however a pound or whatever it is. Never noticed that extra S at the end of the word. So interesting. But there are some health benefits to Brussels sprouts. Any vegetable obviously is going to be better than not having a vegetable, but they've got a lot of antioxidants, anti-cancer compounds. I don't know what that means. It sounds good. And then you got, like, when you just do a quick search, may support heart health. Who knows? May help you fly a spaceship better. I don't know. We can say may before any statement, and it's not wrong, right? So when you're looking at cereal boxes and things like that say may help, may support heart health. Well, yeah, maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't. It's not one way or the other. It's like, that's just a pet peeve of mine, and something that you got to pay attention to when you are trying to buy or purchase or eat healthier, cook healthier, is all that jargon, all that words that are on the packages that really don't mean anything. But when you do a quick search, may support heart health, may support gut health, may reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. And all these things, I think, you're eating vegetables. It's going to help for sure with those things if you're eating double cheeseburgers every day prior to, if you're substituting a double cheeseburger for Brussels sprouts, then yeah, it's going to support your heart health a little bit better than that other processed food is going to do. But I don't know. It just drives me nuts sometimes looking at health claims on food. Obviously, a vegetable is going to be better for you than anything processed. And honestly, it tastes good. I think for me, I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here. It's not going well at the moment. But they taste good. Okay? I guess that's the long story. I don't know where my brain was headed there for a minute. Make them good. A little bit of technique. It's not rocket science, but you can really make a Brussels sprout dish that you're really gonna like. Now, I've said in a previous episode, assuming this one actually I'm releasing after, which I believe will happen, but I've said that I like to order a Brussels sprouts at a restaurant if I go anywhere. And that's true. And the reason for that is that Brussels sprouts, it kind of has a strong flavor. I don't really know how to describe the flavor of a Brussels sprout to somebody who's never had any. But it's a little bit of a bitter flavor. It's a leafy type of vegetable, like a cabbage. I believe it's in like the same family as a cabbage. It's almost a miniature cabbage. And so it's leafy, but it's at the same time got some substance there. It's crunch, and it's small enough where if you you can just bite through the whole thing. You're not biting into a head of cabbage like an apple or something like that. But it's just it's green of flavor. I think green's a flavor. It's just a green flavored vegetable, right? Spinach kind of got a green flavor to it, and it just so happens that they're also green vegetables. That might be a stupid thing to say, but I'm not editing stuff, so. But I get it everywhere I go at a restaurant. If it's a side option, then I'm picking a side because there are a lot of different flavors that you can add to Brussels sprouts, where that Brussels sprout still comes through similarly or the same every time, but depending on what you add to it, it just adds a little bit of, I don't know, something different. So I love Brussels sprouts, and I'll try it every time. I've had my wife and kids and I went out to to Lake Michigan on the beach, and there's a restaurant that had some Thai Brussels sprouts, which was a really odd thing. Kind of stuck out to me. I almost didn't get them because this was like a barbecue place, and everything was like slow cooked barbecue. There was brisket. My meal that I ordered actually was brisket, and it came with cornbread, and they had coleslaw, and you think of that type of a barbecue meal, and then on the menu, and that was like the whole menu, and everything's fried otherwise, and then they just have these Thai Brussels sprouts, and it just seemed like a weird, didn't kind of fit the theme of the rest of the restaurant, but I got them because it piqued my interest, and so maybe they're doing something right with the how they run that operation, but they were really good, and they to me it seemed like a pan-seared Brussels sprout. They were halved, and when you when you cut a Brussels sprout in when you cut a Brussels sprout in half, you cut it what I would say is the long way, not the short way. So you have the root end or the part that sticks to the plant. You're cutting along that so that you have kind of an equal shape, because a Brussels sprout, a lot of them are almost an egg shape, kind of, or a hot air balloon is what they look like. So that root end is the smaller end, and you have them that way. And that's what these were. And then they seemed to be kind of pan fried or seared a little bit, had a little bit of browning, and they were crispy. They were cooked well, and they had peanuts in there, and they might have had, I don't know what all the ingredients that were in there, a little bit on the seasoning side, but they had some peanuts in there. And then I don't know if there's really a peanut sauce, and then some sriracha and some chilies in with it. And it was really good. It was really good. And that was kind of just back in my brain, Thai flavors. And as you start to learn to cook a little bit more, somebody just says, hey, I want a Thai flavored whatever, Brussels sprout. Then you can say, okay, these are the flavors that are in that cuisine. So I'm gonna figure out a way to incorporate whatever it might be to make, to get to what you're asking for, or to maybe even just experiment doing things that way. That's a lot of fun. And if you start experimenting like that, then when you're putting together, a dish towards a certain cuisine, and you're looking for a side that's going to go along with that, rather than just plain Brussels sprouts with no added flavor other than the vegetable itself, now you've got, kind of it goes along with the rest of the food, with the rest of the cuisine, and doesn't seem out of place. So if I had some sort of a barbecued Brussels sprout and the rest of my food's Thai food, it just wouldn't seem to go together. Similar to how having Thai Brussels sprouts with barbecue didn't really seem to fit, but it was still really good. You got a good dish, you cook something well. It's not always going to make sense, but if it tastes good, hey, that's a win. I've also had some Brussels sprouts from some really nice restaurants. My wife and I got a gift card. That's how we go to the very nice restaurants, because I don't want to always spend that money otherwise. But I got some Brussels sprouts, and they were good. But I said to my wife, and I said, try these. And she's like, yeah, the ones you make at home are way better than these ones are. And that made me feel good. I always like a compliment. Who doesn't? But all that goes to, I guess I say that to show that, one, my wife wouldn't lie to me, so I believed her when it came to that, especially with food. She knows she can be honest with me about anything, but she knows that I would rather, like, oh, yeah, you should try making it like this, would be more productive and better to me than a lie saying, oh, you make it better. You know what I mean? So I don't have a problem if somebody tactfully, constructively criticizes my cooking. I think. At least I haven't come across a situation where it's ever been a problem. But I always like to, yeah, this was good. Tweak it a little bit for my taste. And if it's somebody that doesn't like a certain spice level or whatever, then yeah, okay, I get what I'm picking up. I hear what you're saying, but I wanted something that's super spicy or what, So anyway, all I do I guess I'll just dive into the way that I like to prepare. And I'm going to dance around a little bit. Big surprise. Because with Brussels sprouts, I'm just kind of it's a mood-based method if I'm cooking Brussels sprouts on how I'm going to do it. And also sometimes I'll add extra ingredients in along with the Brussels sprouts if I have them at the house. Sometimes I don't, then obviously they won't get added along with it. And a big one as far as an additive, it sounds weird to call it an additive, but just an additional ingredient that I'll use if I have it. If I don't, I'm not real worried about it, but it's bacon. And that's a good way to get somebody that doesn't think they really like Brussels sprouts introduced into it, because as we all know that you put bacon in anything and it's gonna taste good, right? But it also, you have to be a little bit careful with the quantity of bacon, because you can overpower, and now you don't want it just to taste like pure bacon. Again, unless you're trying to get somebody to eat it that's not convinced it's going to taste good. So I don't like to do that. But if I have some leftover bacon, which doesn't happen often, but if I'd made a breakfast meal or breakfast for dinner or something, and any reason you would have extra bacon, got a little bit, it's a good thing if you just got like 1 or 2 pieces sitting in the refrigerator, and maybe instead of throwing them on a sandwich for the next day or whatever, just take those couple pieces. That's more than enough to dice it up into small pieces, throw it in with the Brussels sprouts. And then it's just going to get a little bacon flavor in there, and then it's going to be great. And then the other thing that I like to do, and I usually will aim to do it every time I make it, is have some kind of an onion in with the Brussels sprout. I don't know what it is about the flavors that an onion has that work so well with Brussels sprouts, but they do just go together really well. And I'll use whatever onion you have. I mean, ideally, I would say to use a shallot, or not a shallot. Yeah, shallot. That's the one I'm looking for. Yes. Use a shallot or maybe a red onion. And shallots I do buy those. At first I thought they were some kind of scam, because it's just a red onion. And I've heard before, instead of using shallots, just use less red onion, because the flavor won't be as intense. There is some truth to that, because a shallot is a milder onion flavor. But I like a shallot, and you don't need a ton of it. You're just adding a little bit of onion flavor in there. So just like any onion, it'll sit on your counter for almost as long as you want it to, so it's going to be good. I like to add the shallot in there as well, or a red onion. And then you can, if you really wanted to get a little more onion flavor, you could even maybe do a green onion or a scallion, dice it up on the biases, just like almost as a garnish at the end if you really wanted to. That'll really increase the onion flavor, but or chive or something like that, just to add that extra bit of onion at the end. But I would go with just, I'd say 8 out of 10 times when I'm making Brussels sprouts, I'll just have the Brussels sprouts and shallots. And then if I have leftover bacon, I'm going to throw that in there. And I guess I said before, there's a couple different ways you can prepare them. You can roast them, and then you're just going to do it like you would roast any vegetable, and you can roast it then with some carrots, maybe some sweet potatoes, and some bigger chunks of onion, and put them on a sheet pan, drizzle olive oil, maybe a little salt and pepper or whatever seasoning might sound good if you're doing just kind of a roasted vegetable thing. And that's really good. Roasted vegetables give you a char at the top. You get them in there long enough. And the hard thing is that, Brussels sprouts are a leafy vegetable, like a lettuce or in the cabbage family or whatever they are. They are pretty hard when they're raw, or if they're not cooked all the way through. So like anything else, if you're mixing them together and cooking them together, you want to make sure that your Brussels sprouts are cooked through kind of at the same time as your onion and your carrots and your potatoes. And that's why Brussels sprouts kind of go good with with a mix of vegetables like that, because a potato takes a little while to cook through. A carrot, depending on the diameter and how you cut them, that those are going to take a little bit to cook through. So they really do hold up well with other vegetables and roasting. But that's one way. I don't honestly do a lot of roasting. I was just talking to somebody a little while ago about using my oven in general for cooking. It doesn't feel like cooking to me. As stupid as that might sound to somebody who does a lot of roasting, like, well, you still got to do something about just taking that raw and then putting it in the oven and walking away for a half hour, an hour, whatever it is you're cooking, and then come back and pull it out and look what I made. It just doesn't, I know it is cooking, okay, but it just doesn't seem, you're not as involved through the whole process and everything. And so in my brain, it just feels like I'm not really cooking. It feels more like I'm reheat, or like I'm just heating something up like you would a Hungry Man TV dinner. You just got a couple of steps right at the beginning, pull the plastic off, mix stuff around, preheat the oven, throw it in the oven, take it out, and you're done. And that. I know that's wrong, okay? So don't hate me too much for saying something like that, but that's the way it feels to me, all right? I also hate when people say, I feel like, but that's the reality. I guess that's where I'm at. I'm overcoming this disdain for just throwing stuff in the oven. And a big one is when it comes to meats, certain meats, even chicken. I've actually been using my oven a lot more and cooking my chicken, because I'd end up with dry chicken if I'm just flipping it over 100 times on top of the stove in a pan to get the heat cooked all through and it's a lot better if I just do a quick sear, get it brown on the chicken, and then pull it and put that pan right in the oven and let it finish in the oven, and check it with a meat thermometer, which I also have been religious about lately, but I wasn't. And for the first 10 years of cooking on my own, never used a meat thermometer, but with chicken. And it's just so important to pull that out when it's at the temperature that it needs to be. Like chicken breast, once it hits 155, 160, whatever, you can go even a little lower. Although technically I probably wouldn't recommend it, and then pull it out and let that rest, as opposed to just, all right, I got to see if the chicken's done. Let me slice right through this chicken breast while it's still hot in the pan, and oh, nope, still not done yet. Put it back in, and now all the juices are out. It's dry. And so anyway, I like the flavor of a roasted vegetable, and you can get a good char on there by utilizing the oven and doing it that way. And again, like I said before, that's great if you have other things you need to be paying more attention to. If you're in the mix of it, and you've got to be paying attention to the meat or the sauce or whatever, then baking a vegetable or roasting vegetables is definitely a great option. You still get that charred flavor. It's a little bit different, and it's probably going to be the healthiest way, other than raw, to prepare the vegetables, because you're not sauteing it in butter and oil and all the other things. You might drizzle a little bit of olive oil over the top, add a little salt, pepper, but it's going to be better than the sauteing method. And I kind of do. What I really like to do is anything with a cast iron pan, especially if I'm looking to blacken something by, searing or whatever. And I love that a cast iron pan can just get slid right into the oven. You can just use it on the stovetop. Yes, they're heavy. They are harder to do the wrist flip to mix the vegetables, flip flip it up in the air with a pan. It's definitely harder to do when you have a heavy cast iron pan, but it's just such a versatile pan that's my favorite. But it'll work the same or similarly in a nonstick pan, whatever you got. It doesn't matter. But to cook the vegetables in it, I like having that browned crust, that sear on every vegetable, and that by cutting a Brussels sprout in half, that lengthwise, that just provides a perfect flat surface, and that's going to get charred and brown. And if you're mixing just every couple of minutes, then you're getting that nice browning, and it tastes really good. So I guess the simplest way in that I will cook these is to just cut them all up, cut them in half, and then throw them in a bowl or whatever. And then I'll drizzle olive oil. I usually got like a metal bowl, a bigger bowl, one that allows for tossing of the vegetables, and I'll drizzle a bunch of olive oil and some salt and pepper, and I'll just kind of flip it around and make sure that all the oil is kind of try to get it coating all the different pieces that are in the bowl, and the salt and pepper, obviously, get everything evenly coated. And then heat up the pan, and you just put it in the pan. And then once you can just put it on medium heat and let the pan do the work. It's just kind of leave it alone for a little while, let it sear. And then once you start getting a little blackening a little charring, a little browning, start moving the veggies around. And one tip that I will, if you dry them out too much, I mean, you don't want black chunks of everything's all charred and burned, but you can soften veggies up right at the end, like right before serving, almost like a quick steam. And all you do is just put a little shot of water, and I'm talking like a real small, a couple tablespoons or whatever, eyeball it, but just a quick shot of water and and then put a lid over it to kind of let that, just do a quick steam right before you're serving. That'll help to soften up the vegetable. And that works for a lot of different vegetables. But if you're doing roasting, obviously I wouldn't do it there. If your goal is to have something a little on the drier side, not in a bad way, but then you wouldn't do it. But if you want to soften something up just a little bit at the end, just put it for a minute under doing it that way, and it will soften up. So that's kind of really the main way I do it. And if I cook them, and maybe it's just people just don't cook them a lot, and it's very possible. But I've had a lot of, these Brussels sprouts are really good. I didn't really do anything. It's just salt and pepper and olive oil, And you could use a vegetable oil or a canola oil or whatever. And the temperature's not getting hot enough. I mean, the browning's happening, but if you're using an olive oil, that's got a lower smoke point than a vegetable oil or a canola oil. So you want to be careful not to burn the oil or to get it so hot that you're hitting a smoke point. And honestly, if you get it that hot anyway, the vegetable's probably going to be charred on the outside and still raw on the inside. And that's not going to be ideal anyway. So if you do an olive oil and keep it at a medium heat, it will brown and it will get there. And then this is also a great thing you can do why I like a griddle, outdoor griddle, like a Blackstone or I don't know, everybody's got them now, Pit Boss and all that. I've never I only have a Blackstone, but it's a great vegetable to have out there while you're cooking other things. And you can even, do some different rice dishes and stuff outside in the summer. It's really nice to cook it when you're cooking your chicken or whatever, right on the same thing outside, and you're good to go. But if you want to do, and then like I said too, that's the basic one. If you want to make it taste just a little bit better, in my opinion, then I add shallots, and I'll put those in right at the beginning. You could, if you're worried about the onions, getting too soft and almost disappearing, especially with shallots when you thin slice them. They can just kind of all of a sudden not be there anymore, pretty much, if you're going to have it over the heat for 15 minutes or whatever while you're cooking the other stuff. But you can put them in right in the beginning when you're cooking. It makes it for, like I said, an easy meal. Bacon, if you're gonna incorporate bacon that you didn't have left over from a meal before, I would cook that first in whatever pan you're going to use for the Brussels sprouts. Ideally, if you have raw bacon, and I would cut it into small chunks before I put it in the pan. And then that way you've got that bacon fat that's rendered out that is also going to act as it's going to coat everything even more than some leftover bacon or whatever would. And if you get some thick cut, some thick cut bacon, and it's making me hungry just talking about it. But cook the bacon in the pan first. Just leave that grease in there. I mean, you already got the bacon in there. What are you worried about getting rid of a little bit of grease? You don't need a whole bunch of strips of bacon or whatever. You can just use, a couple pieces, but coat that Brussels sprout and that bacon fat. That is going to be fantastic. But bacon fat too has if cooking for a little while, you're going to see it start to smoke because it's a fat that's got a lower smoke point too. So pay attention to all these things. You don't want burned bacon. You don't want anything burned. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that. That's obvious. But you got to watch it, when you're using these low smoke point oils and things like that. And if you just see it start to smoke or whatever, then turn it down, pull it, just literally pick it up off the heat, get that heat down, and try to mitigate the damage and try to just mix it around, try to get everything moving again. Sometimes I've done that where I'm not paying too close enough attention. And as you cook more, it's interesting, the things that you notice without actually looking at something. Because when you're cooking, you should be using all of your senses. You should be using sight, obviously. Big tangent. My grandma is blind. She's not with us anymore, but she's blind, and she did not have sight. And she cooked some of the best food ever. But I'm going to talk about her someday because it's just really cool. And she's an awesome woman and very inspirational, old school cooking food and whatever. But most people are going to be using sight as one of the ways that they, as a tool in cooking. But also, the more you cook, the more smell and sound, not feel a little bit, but smell and sound are big senses in cooking that it just takes experience and recognizing. And it really doesn't take that long to start picking up on. I'll be doing something if I'm prepping and I've got something cooking and you hear it in a pan, and you can hear when a pan is running low on an oil or a liquid. If you're cooking, all of a sudden it starts to get dry and you hear popping and more popping and sizzle than you. And I go, oh, I got a quick turnaround. I hear a little sizzle or a pop or something, and nope, I got to add a little more oil or whatever, liquid, or it's too dry. And same with smell. When you're you can smell that browning starting to occur on a vegetable or on a meat for that matter, and you I gotta, that immediately draws your eyes and draws your attention to that dish when you smell or hear something that sounds a little bit off. And it's a hard thing to explain, but I think a lot of people might know what I'm talking about when that occurs. Sound, when something's boiling over, your back's turned or you're even in the other room and you hear the sizzle because the water boiled over, or so you're using all of your senses, whether you know it or whether we recognize it or not. It's there and it's happening, and it's helpful when you start to pay attention to what you're and recognize. Sometimes we do stuff without even knowing it, or what caused us to react. And if why did I even look at the pan? I haven't, it's just sitting there. Oh, I heard something, something didn't sound right. So that made me look. And when you start to pay attention to why you're doing what you're doing, you can really start to hone in on getting better at cooking by utilizing all of your senses instead of them just being there and being reactionary. Now you're listening for that change or smelling for that change when we're blooming spices and oil or making a roux or any example, I guess. But those are a couple that come to mind when you start to smell the difference in the food or in the ingredients and when they change. Garlic too. The garlic has a nice smell to it, but then unfortunately it's usually too late, but all of a sudden you get that burned garlic smell and it was too, went too far or whatever it might be. Use all your senses and they're there and we're using them whether we think we are or not. And then tasting as we go. When you got raw, the nice thing is with raw vegetables and you can taste as many times as you want. When we're cooking meats, we're a little limited in how often we can change and adjust or how often we can taste and adjust because it's raw meat. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that's that. I don't know how I got on that again, but use your senses and they're there to help us, right? So just try to pay attention next time something happens in the kitchen and you don't know what caused you to look at the pan finally or whatever. And hopefully it's more than just waiting for a smoke alarm to go off, right? So that's but add your see if I can go all the way back to whatever I started before that. Use bacon, use onion. Those are kind of the two, but I usually always, like I said, have shallots or red onion. I've never really done white onion. I'd say it's better than no onion at all. I don't know what it is about a red onion that just goes well with Brussels sprouts. It's used a lot, even in restaurants, to go along with it. And usually a red onion isn't, I shouldn't say usually. Red onions usually dang, I just did it again. I just said I shouldn't say usually. Red onion is typically used in a raw situation, right? Like a salad or I guess a salad or whatever you might have with raw onion or like a Greek gyro or something with cucumber and all, tzatziki sauce and a red onion and I don't know. Red onion's typically used in more of a raw setting or as a raw ingredient, and white onion or a Spanish onion or Vidalia or whatever is usually when you're cooking it. But when you cook it with Brussels sprouts, it just seems to work the best in my opinion, or a shallot. So yeah, red onion on pizza is just normally it's heated up, but it's just kind of out there. I guess any onion on pizza is just heated up, but maybe I'm wrong on that, but red onion just seems to fit the best with Brussels sprouts. And sometimes I won't cut them in half. If I'm feeling like I need to be working on my knife skills, I'll julienne. I don't know if that counts. But just shave them, basically. Just cut them thin strips. Cut them in half first so they're not rolling around on your countertop. And then cut them long. You know what I'm talking about. Just basically shred them. And I've done that before too. What can be difficult and off-putting about cutting them that way and then doing the same method, olive oil, salt, pepper, even some onion in there or whatever. But you kind of end up with a more of a wetter pile of Brussels sprouts, not so much these individual crunchy browning. It just can be a little bit more shredded, as you know what I'm talking about. You just end up with more of a pile of them rather than individual Brussels sprouts. And while it makes a lot of shredded Brussels sprouts, it doesn't. It's like condensed down because they're shredded and there's no air gaps when you scoop them onto a plate, obviously. So it's just it's a different it's a different texture though. So if you don't like the big chunky chunks of Brussels sprouts, then try shredding it. It's just a different experience when you're eating it. Flavors are still going to be the same, right? Because that we didn't change, but except for maybe you're not able to quite get as much browning. So, but it's another way, and I've done it like that quite a few times. I've never used a mandolin. I rarely use a mandolin because I'm cooking for typically a smaller amount of people I prefer, I like practicing the knife skills because I don't do it day in, day out like somebody who's a cook at a restaurant where you want to use the mandolin. It's the fastest, most efficient way. They scare me. Like I said before, I'm in construction. I use tools all the time. I use table saws and power tools and hand tools. I've had stitches like 6 times on my hands. I've never, knock on wood, cut myself with a mandolin. And a lot of that is due to the fact that I don't use one very often. I think that's really the big thing. Because it's so easy to get. And Brussels sprouts are so small and they're so hard raw that it's something you have to put a fair amount of pressure on, and I worry about that. I would practice your knife skills on them though, because they are little, and so it's a good way to get focused and then practice your cutting. I also would say, if I had my choice, and this could very well just be me, I like the smaller Brussels sprouts better than the bigger ones. The bigger ones I believe tend to be more bitter, and so when I'm buying them, I like to get them. See if I can get some smaller ones, depending on where you're buying them. If you're buying them from a grocery store, a supermarket, or whatever, you might not really have a choice. It's usually one brand or 1 or 2 brands to pick from, and they mix in whatever they mix in. But I've gotten some big Brussels sprouts, and I almost don't know it. Sometimes if I do get something like that, I'll cut them into quarters. So they get too big, and it's hard to. They just take too long to cook, and so so it's not really worth it. I aim for a smaller one. There are some farmers markets around us, and I haven't done it. I should. I'm going to next year, but they sell them right off the stalk, and they'll just hand you a stalk of them. If you've never seen them, it looks like the Jingle Bells, it's just a big stalk, thickness of a corn stalk, and then there's just these little balls all on the sides. They're the craziest looking thing. If you've never seen it before, pause right now and look up a Brussels sprout plant. And they're crazy looking. They're really cool. But if you can find them, I prefer them a little more, a little smaller, a little more immature. They get harder and more bitter as they get bigger, in my opinion. You might feel differently, but that's where I'm at with those. But then one of the things that I've done too, that I'll do a lot recently, and it helps to get my kids to eat it, big surprise, Brussels sprouts, is to drizzle some honey at the end over top of it. Everything's still hot. Brussels sprouts are, in my opinion, you want to eat them hot. If you're cooking them in a pan and searing them and all that, you want them served hot. And that was something I had gotten from a restaurant that clued me into that, is taking honey. And don't put it in the honey in like you would. I don't know. Sometimes I think, I want the vegetable to kind of marinate in the sauce, or whatever it is, to pick up some of that flavor, and then I cook it. If you do that with honey, you're going to have a burned, sticky. It's going to be you're going to throw it out, is what's going to happen, I believe, with that. But put some honey over it right at the end. And it doesn't have to, you can use as much as you want, a lot or little. It's going to taste, honey's one of those beautiful things that it's a little bit's going to taste good and a lot's going to taste good. It's just all up to your personal preference on that. Or try some hot honey. I like that because I don't even know what is in hot honey that makes it hot. I don't know if it's like cayenne pepper, or they, force feed bees jalapenos and or what the deal is, how they get hot honey. But hot honey is really good, but that can be overwhelming. my kids don't like that. I'm not doing that for them. Or if you are doing similar to like that Thai Brussels sprouts I talked about in the beginning that I've tried, maybe do some honey and some sriracha. And I'll do that sometimes in lieu of hot honey if I'm making it for a bigger group, because sriracha's got a little spice, but it's not, it's not overwhelming. And surprisingly, hot honey can be spicier than honey with just a little bit of sriracha mixed in. And it kind of disappears, it just kind of glazes the Brussels sprouts and makes them taste fantastic, in my opinion. And I think that's really the only way I make them. It's not anything crazy, but if you take these methods in pan searing in general or whatever, and just practice them, and maybe you do have to pay a little bit more attention to it, and you can't just leave it and let it sit, but you can get some. It's amazing the fewer ingredients you use, as long as the ingredients quality is there, the better it tastes. And you just want to taste that pure ingredient or that pure vegetable and not muddy it up sometimes. And maybe it's just, like I said, just practicing that technique, listening, paying attention to the sounds that you're hearing or the smells that you're smelling. And when you start to see that color change lets you know they're starting to get cooked. Not only the browning, obviously that's cooking happening, but also the color of the vegetable. When vegetables cook, they get brighter, right? Like you think of a carrot or Brussels sprouts or broccoli, especially when you're steaming them or blanching a vegetable quick. The color just goes from a dull green or orange or whatever it is to a bright color. Even tomatoes get bright, So using your senses, just pay attention and just practice. And maybe it does require, if you've never done it before, giving it your full attention to get it done correct. But once you do, once you do it a few times, you're going to be able to just recognize by sound or by smell or a quick glance that, time to stir it, time to move it around or whatever. But try it with the honey, though. If you haven't tried that, and maybe a little shot of sriracha, and mix it around before you serve it. Just give it a try if you haven't. It's definitely worth doing. And it for my family, it makes it so my kids will eat them. You know what I mean? And sometimes that can be a struggle. And that's the one thing, and Brussels sprouts are one, any vegetable really, but with the story my mom had of her parents making her, and I totally understand why. There's no judgment at all, but I totally understand what their thought was on it. But the fact that my mom still to this day will not eat Brussels sprouts when they taste that good is, to me, like I don't want to force my kids to eat vegetables, but sometimes you got to eat. You have to at least try it. Try one bite. You have to eat one Brussels sprout. If you don't like it, you don't have to have another one, but you have to at least give it a try, right? And I think I don't remember who it is that says the no thank you bite, right? You have to at least have one bite, and you can say no thank you, I do not want any more, but you have to have a no thank you bite. I think that's a cute way of describing what's going on there. But you put honey on it, it's going to go a long way into helping your kids eat it. And if you got a natural honey or a whatever, it's not like we're pouring table sugar on top of it, right? Maybe. That's what I tell myself anyway. So anyway, that's kind of that's what I do with Brussels sprouts. Super exciting, super simple, and it tastes great. I'm trying not to say phenomenal because I say that a lot, but it tastes really good, and I use them. We have them all the time, and I would recommend it if you've never tried it. Give it a try. Simple thing to prepare. Tastes great. Everybody's going to like it, unless you had to eat boiled Brussels sprouts as a kid. Then maybe not. So let me know. Let me know what you've got with recipes. I mean, I've seen them, at restaurants, different ways to prepare it, add some flavors to it, maybe give it more of a Asian food type cuisine flair to it, or whatever. If you're doing more of a, like I said, I've seen some with barbecue sauce and just different stuff. It's always interesting to me, the combination. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some of them are gimmicky, and some of them taste great. They're all worth trying in my mind. So let me know what you like to do, or maybe a different method in cooking it. There's many things I've never thought of before, so let me know. I would appreciate it. I'll read any emails and comments I get. So email me at thecookbetterpodcast@gmail.com. And I hope that something I talked about today will help you cook just a little bit better.